Alright, hey everybody, this video is about Tim Pool. It is not a political video. I want to get that out of the way right away. Tim said some very silly things about atheism and theism. Somebody sent it to me. I thought it was very poorly thought through, and that's what we're looking at. I don't care about Tim Pool politically. I don't watch him. I have no idea what he's talking about in this video. I didn't even watch the part of the video that's not about the theism stuff. I watched what was suggested to me. Anything beyond that, I don't care. It's not relevant to the topics on my channel. So argue amongst yourselves as much as you like, but leave me out of it.
I am not a deeply religious person, man. I am not theistic in the sense of any one particular religion.
Okay, so are you not religious or are you not a theist?
I'll tell you.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I do believe in God.
Theist, then. Theistic, but not religious. Gotcha. Thank you for addressing that so promptly and clearly.
And it has a lot to do with, I grew up Catholic, and I read a whole lot about, religion and theology and things like this. So like grade school stuff, so no great scholarly works for the most part. And then as I got older and I left and I became very atheist, I started to read about science, and that actually started to connect the dots into a lot of what I was really reading from religion. And then I kind of just became more agnostic.
That's interesting, becoming softer on the idea of theism because of science. There's probably a lot to talk about there, but you don't really talk about it too much, and I have like 8 minutes of your video to get through, so I think I won't either.
Before finally settling down and saying, I think the issue with people and the idea of God is that most people who are midwits, as it were, of average intelligence, they have a narrow view of what God is or could be. And so a lot of people, when I have these conversations, will say things like, a God, there's no man in the sky, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why would you believe that God is a man?
Tim, that's a joke. They're equating the Christian God or the Muslim God or the deistic God, for that matter, to something like Zeus or the paintings of God, big beardy man in a throne. And they're saying that because so many versions of God that people believe in have so many human characteristics. Human thoughts, feelings, foibles. The Christian God is so much a reflection of the mind of people, even if it's not meant to be literally a man. Of course Christians don't believe God is literally a man, like with a face and a beard and feet. Well, okay, when he was Jesus, then maybe, but other than that, not a man. It's a joke. It's mildly ridiculing commentary. If someone actually thinks that's what religious people believe, they're either very, very, very new to the subject, or they definitely don't rise to the level of a midwit.
You know what I mean? Like that's my issue with it.
Your issue is that you're taking the joke literally? Sounds like your problem.
I believe it's fair to say that as humans, we are but simple specks in an indifferent universe.
Agreed.
And to be less crass about it, we are microscopic compared to the grandeur of the cosmos.
You really put some flair on that grandeur. Even had to back up before you finished and give it a second run. Make sure you got it just right.
The grandeur.
But yeah, I agree. We are microscopic compared to the grandeur of the cosmos.
If we are looking around at the universe and struggling to grasp and comprehend it, it stands to reason that whatever exists beyond our understanding is beyond our understanding.
I suppose it'd be pretty silly to argue with that.
And that there likely is, in my opinion, based on the fact that we are but tiny specks in this universe.
Butt specks.
A greater power.
Oh yeah, there's tons of greater powers. I mean, we can't control basically anything. A supernova is a greater power than us. The sun's a greater power. The fucking ocean's a greater power. And beyond that, all the laws of physics, the nature of the universe, space-time, quantum mechanics, gravity, these are all greater powers than us. And as you say, I'm sure there are a lot of things that we don't yet know about. Now, if we're talking about intelligent thinking greater powers, it gets a little more iffy. I guess if you're talking about living organisms that are more intelligent than us, you could get there through playing with numbers in some sort of modified Drake equation. But of course, garbage in, garbage out, right? The Drake equation is really just a way of guessing stuff. And it's for guessing about stuff that's very like us, right? Living organisms like us that live on planets like we do, that are interested in developing technology that make their signs of life detectable. This is the kind of thing we do when we talk about the likelihood of there being alien species that are intelligent in the way we're intelligent, and the likelihood of finding them. But I don't know that that's what you're talking about when you say you think it's likely that there's a greater power. I don't even know that something like that would apply to what you're talking about. I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, but by what steps are you reaching this conclusion where you say, I think it's likely that this is the case?
To put it simply, I'm not saying that the Bible is the true word of God or anything like that. I don't know. I'm agnostic on all these religions. Everyone seems to think they're right. I certainly think God exists.
Right, so again, we're talking about God here. I don't see how you get from, well, we're not that important in the grand scale of the universe to, therefore, God exists. Maybe you'll expand on this, but at this point, I'm not seeing any meat connecting up the argument. It's just an observation and some unrelated conclusion.
And I think it's fair to say that, I'll put it this simply, you know for a fact, as an atheist, a secularist, or an agnostic, that you don't know even 1/300,000th of what the universe is.
I agree. That's a big part of why I don't believe in God. I think that what's unknown to us is just unknown. I don't treat that as an invitation to fill those gaps with just whatever I feel like. I treat it as an obligation not to do that. I'm okay with not knowing. I don't need to have those things filled, but if I'm gonna fill them, I want to be right.
We know that we don't know very much. And that is to say that the one thing we do know is that the universe is stunningly beyond comprehension.
Yes, and the idea behind theism is to make it feel like it's not stunningly beyond comprehension by applying a very human explanation to it and saying good enough. And I say very human because, again, intelligence, will, love, wrath, and so on, all of these things that people ascribe to God, incredibly human ideas. Does that humanness mean necessarily that it's not true? No. But it is a reason to give it some careful thought before jumping into it head first. This type of explanation for the universe really has the appearance of people trying to reduce their feeling that it really is so incomprehensible by interpreting the fundamental nature of reality as really not being so different from us. You know, the universe came from something very like us in many ways. And exactly because of what you're saying, I struggle very much to believe that that's likely to be true. I think that the true nature of what this all is, how it really works, where it really comes from, if that even means anything, is very likely to be far, far beyond the human brain's ability to truly comprehend it all. At the very least, in any sort of intuitive way that's remotely accurate to what it really is. And I would be very surprised if the answer really is something with human-like characteristics like intelligence and will and emotion.
And if that's the case, then it stands to reason things beyond our comprehension exist, and therefore there is some form of a God.
Okay, again, we have an observation with an unrelated conclusion attached to it. Things beyond our comprehension exist. Okay, I accept that. Therefore, there is some form of a God. Really? Why? You say it stands to reason, but you haven't actually told me a reason. You've told me the start of the argument and the end of the argument, but not the actual main part of the argument. Everything that matters here is missing.
Now, a lot of people will say, like, oh, that's a cop-out, because they think there is this narrow view of what God is, that God is in the likeness of man and, like, snapping, their fingers and making things appear. And I'm like, that's just a human view, a human world view of what creation and sentience or consciousness could be.
Yeah, the entire idea of God is a human worldview of what creation, for the lack of a better word, and sentience and consciousness are. And it doesn't have to be a literal man who literally snaps his fingers and does things for that to be the case. The entire thing is based on human ideas through and through.
And we are too tiny of specks in this universe to know.
Then why are you acting like you know? This is the thing with theism. It often comes down to this idea that things are so incomprehensible and so beyond us, and there's so much we don't understand. So let me tell you about how I know the answer. No, I don't accept that, and I don't accept it because I accept the other stuff that you were saying, the stuff that led up to your conclusion. Everything you were saying before is a reason for me to reject this idea, at least for the moment. But now you're asking me to abandon all that and just believe whatever.
But more importantly, like, just mathematically, I'll put it this way. If the universe is quantified on a scale of 1,000,000 to 1, then from the most rudimentary of functions, humans are a 2 or a 3.
Okay, humans big dumb, humans can't do much, humans are small, and humans live on a little planet that's not important, something, therefore God. Yeah, I'm not buying it.
Because we have basic functions of atoms and elements and attraction and the natural forces. These are things we know, or we think we know, or we've mapped out to a certain degree. That we could be wrong about a lot of these things, but we've certainly witnessed things existing.
Oh, there's a whole ridiculous solipsistic rabbit hole to go down there if you want to. What if you haven't witnessed things existing? What if you only think you have? What if you've been dreaming? What if it's all in your head? What if the only thing that exists in all of reality is your mind just floating disembodied in nothingness? It's a possibility, right? So I guess it must be true. I mean, there's stuff we don't comprehend, so...
Human construct and the chemical reactions are barely a notch above baseline that we've witnessed in the universe.
Baseline in terms of what? Energy release? Or what do you mean?
That is to say there are things beyond our comprehension so far above us. Yeah, I think it's reasonable to believe that God exists, but
we just keep going around and around, eh? Back to this again and again. There are things we don't understand, or things that happen that are above us in terms of energy levels or something. Therefore, I don't know, assume there's a God. Look, I don't have anything to refute here. Normally what I'm responding to on this channel are arguments from people. The problem I'm having is I'm halfway through the section of the video I want to actually look at, and so far there is no argument. There's the head of an argument and the tail of an argument, but they're just kind of sewn together and the body's missing. Is an argument missing all of its internal organs dead, or was it ever really alive?
I can simplify it another way too. Simulation theory I find absolutely fascinating. We had Seamus and I have had a great from Freedom Tunes have had great conversations about this.
Simulation theory. Okay, so you mean that thing that when you talk to God believers about it and you say, hey, what if instead of God we're really living in a simulation? They say, yeah, but then who made the universe where the simulation was made? And I have to kind of agree with them. I mean, not in the way the question is asked, because, who made it is always a loaded question, but in the sense that it doesn't actually address any of these problems that we're talking about. If we're a simulation running at a computer somebody else made in their real universe, or maybe if one universe or 10 universes or 100 universes above us are all also simulations, at some point you get back to the original universe and you still have the question, where did that come from? Why is it there? So this question really has no relevance to what we're talking about, which is the basic nature of reality.
When you think about what Elon Musk says,
something I do very rarely when it comes to this sort of topic.
Elon Musk says things like, we live in a simulation. If simulations are possible, and the universe has been around this long, it stands to reason that before our reality existed, there was a more advanced race that created a simulated version of this reality. There are people who genuinely believe in simulation theory.
Yes, I know. It's an interesting idea. It's fun to toss around as some sort of thought experiment. Some people try to bring up an argument that it's actually more likely that we're a simulation than not. And I kind of put that on the same level as the arguments that sort of try to wordplay God into existence. It's like, yeah, haha, very clever, but you can kind of argue that way for a lot of stuff. Either way, I'm not really here to talk about simulation theory because it really doesn't have much to do with theism.
There's that really funny, the Abby woman, whatever her name is, she made the conspiracy theory chart. I talked about, Seamus did a video about it, where she writes in one of her conspiracy theory sections, we have questions, meaning implying plausibility. She puts simulation theory alongside Iran-Contra. Like, Iran-Contra literally happened. That whole thing happened. We know it happened. There are hearings about it. And she puts simulation theory in there as well, as if we know we live in a simulation. We just have questions about why.
I have no idea what you're talking about or who you're talking about, but it sounds like the argument basically goes, there was a person, and the person thought simulation theory was likely true, or thinks she knows it's true. Okay, well, thank you. I'll definitely keep the opinion of this person I've never heard of in mind. Okay, I decided to actually go and figure out what you're talking about. I went to Freedom Tunes and typed in conspiracy chart, and I found this video of Freedom Tunes making fun of the conspiracy chart. So apparently you guys think this person's kind of an idiot, which makes me even more confused why you think I'm supposed to accept this as an argument. Like, hey, this person I think is a moron said it was true.
Okay, that's a bold statement.
To say that we know it's true and we just have questions about why, yeah, I agree. I don't think that's really what you meant to imply with the chart. Here's the part of the chart in question. As you can see, Iran-Contra and we live in a simulation are above the speculation line, alongside things like the JFK assassination, Area 51, UFOs. What's being said here is that these things are speculation. But I've heard from people, personally, that we do in fact know we live in a simulation, and I agree. That's a bold claim, and one that I don't think they can really back up. And so while the idea is fun to talk about, I'm certainly not going to take it for granted that it's true.
However, what I find fascinating about proponents of simulation theory, because I do find the concept fascinating, is that they're not saying we're in a simulation. They're saying we're in a constructed universe by a higher power.
No, I don't think that's quite right. I mean, a simulation in the sense of inside of a computer, which is what we're talking about, refers to replicating some aspect of reality inside the computer. Now, this idea of simulation theory is based on our understanding that computers are possible in our universe. And so maybe somebody in another universe, or super universe, used their computer to create a simulation with some rules similar to their universe. So for example, where computers computers are physically possible, much in the same way that now we talk about creating a simulation inside of our computers based on our universe. If you drop that part, the simulation part, and you say the universe that they created is entirely constructed from scratch with no reference to their universe, it undercuts the entire idea behind simulation theory. I don't see how that does you any favors. And if that's not what you're trying to do by saying it's not a simulation, it's a constructed universe, then I also don't see what favors that does you in terms of your argument. It doesn't really seem to change anything. The idea remains the same. They are, in fact, talking about a simulated universe.
And I'm like, that's literally what they told me when I was in kindergarten, dude.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the problem, is you're coming at this conversation based on what they told you in kindergarten.
When someone comes to me with this idea of simulation theory, like Elon Musk, these very smart individuals, and they say something to me that I was told when I was 5.
If that was what your Catholic teachers told you when you were 5, I don't think they did a very good job explaining the whole thing to you. Either way, look, just because someone you think is smart says something, some guy who's capable of putting together a company that makes rockets and a company that makes electric cars, clearly he has some brains, at the very least in business. If that guy says something about nothing to do with anything he's involved in, something for which there's no observational evidence, no scientific evidence whatsoever, an idea that was purely pulled out of the air by people who are just very enthusiastic about the future potential of computer simulation, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make it true or more likely true. It doesn't matter if you think it has similarities to what you got told in Catholic school when you were 5 years old. Just because two different ideas share some sort of similarity in the sense of being about where our universe came from, and positing that some sort of intelligent entity was involved. By the way, extremely different kinds of entities. In the simulation theory version, the bearded man isn't necessarily so unreasonable, because in that case we're talking about a physical entity in a physical universe that made a computer using the laws of physics, much like us. But yeah, just because two ideas have similarities, that doesn't make either of them true, particularly if there's no evidence that either of them is actually true. So yet again, we have this horribly flawed argument, and it's basically Elon Musk and the lady who made the conspiracy chart say they believe in simulation theory, even though she doesn't. And that sounds like a 5-year-old's understanding of God, and therefore God real. That's just awful. That's really bad.
I'm like, that's literally what church was telling us. They just didn't call it a simulation.
Yeah, that's because they didn't think it was. And if you told them when you were 5 years old that these were the same idea, they would have smacked you.
They said that a higher power, God, created the universe and all that stuff. And it's like, okay, you believe it or you don't.
Okay, I don't. And you've given me no reason to think I should. In fact, earlier you gave me reasons to think I shouldn't.
What I find fascinating is that through independent investigation and science, we now have great thinkers like Elon Musk finding themselves at level 1 of basic theism.
Okay, calling Elon Musk a great thinker in terms of science is generous, much like calling simulation theory level 1 of basic theism is generous. But, you do realize there are scientists, actual full-blown scientists, very successful ones, very intelligent, very famous ones, who are just theists outright. Yeah, there's a lot of them. That doesn't mean God exists. That means some people believe God exists. And by the way, simulation theory is poorly described by the word theory. It's not a robust scientific theory. It's basically just the idea that, hey, maybe someday we humans can make real good simulations of the universe. And if we can do it, eventually, maybe, then maybe something else already did. Maybe we are that simulation of the universe. Maybe they're running a whole bunch of simulations of universes. And maybe their universe is a simulation, and maybe there's millions of those. Wow, there could be so many simulations that it's way more likely that we're one of them and not the original. That's it, really. It's science fiction. It's coming up with cool ideas and going, wow, what if that's true? Well, I agree. Wow, what if that's true? It's neat. It's neat to talk about when not engaged in a conversation like this where it's used as evidence for something. But that's it. It's not like this is the product of some intense scientific research.
That if you look at the great thinkers of theology, I mean like legitimate ones. Obviously, there's great thinkers, but you could criticize and question. But if you look at some of these truly great philosophers, many of whom are religious, they've asked these questions a long, long time ago and actually had great philosophical discussions around these concepts of a constructed universe, and thus we end up with the belief in God.
So philosophers argued about constructed universes in the past, and therefore, I don't know, what do you want from me? Some people talked about a thing, and some of them believed in God, possibly as the result of talking about it. And so what? What are you going for here? Because I'm really trying to avoid accusing you of just a blatant appeal to authority.
Now, I don't know about a whole lot of what we hear from the words of man, and that's my issue with most theism.
Okay, yeah, that's how I feel about Elon Musk and whatever philosophers you might be referring to.
If a human being comes to me and says they speak on behalf of the greater power, I say, yeah, sorry, I don't believe you sorry, I just don't.
But if someone you think is cool comes to you and says, hey, I think there's some sort of greater power, then you go, holy shit, really? Now I believe it.
And that's why I'm mostly not theistic.
You've said more than once in this video, I believe in God. How are you mostly not theistic? You mean you're not religious.
And that's why even after, reading so much, my general view is that I think there is evidence of God. I think the problem is many atheists and agnostics assume that must mean there's a bald, bearded man in white robes. And I'm like, that is childish absurdity, to put it mildly.
Okay, there's a lot of atheists watching this video. Please leave a comment below if you think God has to be a bald, bearded man in white robes. I will be shocked if any of you think that that's really what Christians and other theists think God is. At the very least, you don't think he has to be bald, right? When have you ever seen a bald God? Come on.
No, I think that there's evidence for God in the complexity of the universe.
Okay, well, since you don't get into it, I'm not going to get into it because I don't have the energy for that.
And when people talk about simulation theory, they're effectively saying evidence for God.
No, I mean, for one thing, they're not saying anything about evidence, generally. I guess the closest they get is something like, yeah, but quantum something something. Matter isn't really material. It's all information and probability. And switching bits in a computer produces a little bit of heat, and there's heat in the universe. That's kind of like a computer somehow. But of course, more importantly, they're not talking about God. Certainly nothing that most theists would recognize as God. You're talking as if it's only atheists who wouldn't think this was really God. You're making fun of us for thinking God has to be bald and bearded and wearing robes, calling us childish for believing the thing I don't think any of us actually believe. And meanwhile, you're failing to recognize that it's not just atheists who would not recognize this as a God. It's the vast majority of theists as well, because when people talk about God, they're not talking about some teenage hacker sitting at a computer, even if he's bald and has a beard and a robe. If some person created our fake universe, that doesn't elevate that person to the status of a god. It diminishes us to the status of a simulation.
I'll put it this way. Don't take the word God to mean guy in the clouds. That is childish. It really, really is.
Yeah, unless he's got a laptop with him.
When Elon Musk says, mathematically, there is circumstantial evidence with simulations being possible that we exist in a simulation, or at least if he entertains the plausibility of such a claim, I agree with him. I'm like, yes.
Do you mean specifically just when someone like Elon Musk says it? Do you think it's plausible because he said it, or do you think it's plausible because it's plausible? And then beyond that, if you think it's plausible, how does that lead to therefore it's true? Because you said you think there is a God. I'm not sure if that's based on this. You're talking like it's based on this. Well, how do you get from, yeah, it's plausible, which I kind of agree with. I mean, it's at least based on realistic ideas, right? Physical laws, computers. It'd require a crazy-ass powerful computer. It'd be an insane simulation, but, the basic idea at least is vaguely plausible. But how do you get from that to therefore it's true? And there actually really is this thing that apparently you call a god. Again with the problem, right? Elon Musk says it, so I think it's plausible. Therefore I believe in God. There's the start, there's the end, where's the middle?
Where's the meat?
And so there's this really funny comic of the IQ bell curve. On the lowest end are the dumbest people saying God exists. On the highest end are people wearing robes saying, yes, God exists. And then there are people in the middle, the midwits, who are just like, no, God's not real.
Yeah, I've seen that before. I've seen multiple versions of it before. I don't know if you mean this one, or this one, or this one, which is the best of the three. So now the argument is, I saw a funny meme, therefore you're a dumb midwit, and I'm a genius who believes the exact same thing the total morons believe. Not an argument. Memes can be fun, but if you're getting your ideas from them, you probably have to give your head a shake.
So I'll put it this way. I don't know if any of these books or scriptures or great religions around the world are correct. I certainly think that the universe is so complex that if consciousness exists, there should exist a higher degree of consciousness.
Why? The argument's missing. But okay, I accept it, why not? We're at that point in the video. But if that higher degree of consciousness exists, then there should exist an even higher degree of consciousness. And so on forever. Which, to be fair, is probably exactly what the theists are going to tell you about your simulation theory god. And speaking of which, look, see, that's the theists over there on the left, and then over there on the right, that's me on the super smart part, and that's you in the middle. You're a midwit. See, I agree with the dum-dums. That makes me smart. And see the robes? That's impressive, right?
That is to say that our brains, I'll put it this way. We have a brain. Our brain is powerful. It grants us understanding to a certain degree of our universe. Certainly, then it's possible that a larger brain could exist, 10 times as large, maybe structured in different ways, or a decentralized network of brains that compute information and have the ability to perceive, construct, and manipulate beyond our reasoning.
Okay, could, maybe, could. I agree, could. But what you said was if consciousness exists, there should exist a higher degree of consciousness. And you didn't back that up. You didn't even try to. Coulds and maybes aren't going to get you there. As an atheist, I agree with your coulds and maybes. Somewhere out there in the universe, there could be something way smarter than us. That doesn't even get you to therefore that's true in our universe. Let alone our universe was created by something in another universe running a computer program. I'm also not convinced that if it was a computer program, that the person running the program in another universe would have to be significantly smarter than a human. Why should that be the case? I mean, yeah, it's a more complex piece of software than we run now. Yeah, the computer running it would probably be more complex than anything we could build, but that's because of limitations of our universe, not because of limitations of our brains. None of what you're saying meshes together even into a coherent idea, let alone anything that would lead me to a firm conclusion in favor of that idea.
Does that mean that to put it simply, I have a very broad view of what God could be, to simplify.
Yeah, you have such a broad view of it that really you could be talking about just about anything. I mean, towards the end there, you were talking about just a being that's 10 times smarter than us, which could easily just be some alien from another planet, and apparently even that counts as a god. So you have this super broad range of ideas, and you just toss them all into the god box, because why not? And then you say, I don't know, I believe that thing. The thing that's a whole bunch of different things, and I have no idea which one it is that I'm even talking about. And the reason you believe it is because maybe it's plausible, and maybe if we're this intelligent, something's more intelligent, and Elon Musk said one of the things, and therefore you think it's true. Well, I wouldn't consider that good enough to say I believe something, but I guess do whatever you want, man. Sure seems like you're having fun. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching. If you would be so kind before you go, please give the video a like and click subscribe if you haven't. If you really like the channel, please consider supporting with even just like a couple bucks a month. It helps a lot. Huge thanks to all of my supporters who've already made that decision. It's incredible. Thank you very much. If you want early access, sign up to the email list, list.logicked.com, and I'll see you next time.